going to talk about Test 7 of the reading program. Two passages, music and peril. There is no introduction, so it takes a little while to figure out what the perspective of these two are. Passage 1 clearly takes the study, music and peril, it's in italics, and decides that this is going to be a big problem culturally for America. Passage 2, when you get into it, you realize it's discussing the same thing, music and peril, but is taking a less severe analysis of that, as if to say the problem's not as big as some of the critics would suggest. Passage 2 may have been written in response to Passage 1. It may have been written in anticipation of Passage 1, but clearly it offers a different message. All right, question number 1 in lines 3 through 5 suggests that the situation described could be considered, your best answer is A, rapid. It says, in a span of only 30 years, the number of children playing musical instruments has been cut in half. You've got that word only 30 years. That doesn't mean suspicious, inevitable, essential, rapid. It's been fairly quick. I know 30 years doesn't sound quick, but in the context of something like this, it is. Number 2, the author of passage 1 suggests that the data in lines 9 and 10, and you should go check these lines out, should ideally be, and if you look at lines 9 and 10, it is a set of data collected from from elementary and middle schools all over the country. Some get eliminated, but I mean your best answer is B, diverse. C could be confusing, except for it's not just elementary, it's also middle school, and the others don't really work. They're not there. The idea from being all over the country is that you're going to have some diversity. So that's your key word for number 2. Your answer is B. For number 3, the author of passage 2 would most likely argue that the reach of survey in passage 1, 14 line, they're directing you to lines 14 and 15 is. So how would the writer of passage 2 feel about lines 14 and 15 in passage 1? And your best answer is B. It's less relevant to the study than the author of passage 1 believes. In other words, it's not as big a deal. Music is changing. It's not dying. And if you look at lines 14 and 15, given the broad reach of the survey, the fact that it has collected its data from at least the 5 most populous towns, music in peril is a statistically sound document. That's the case that he's making. And I think the passage 2 writer would agree that it's accurate data, you're just misreading it. It's not going to be as cataclysmic, it's not going to be as horrible as you think it is. And your best answer is B. For number 4, the final paragraph of passage 1, and it's a lot of lines to look over, but you should look them over. Line 24 through 37 serves primarily to D, suggests the cultural implications of the trend it is describing. Specifically, it's talking with phrases at the end that musicians can't play and the populace can't hear. This would be cultural implications. If music was to fade out of American history, out of our culture, yes, it would be very different. So that's what he's talking about. D is by far your best answer. For number 5, we are talking about passage 2. What would the author of passage 2 would most likely consider the final 2 sentences of passage 1 to be, and you need to go back and look at them, ours is a dire world when not only have our musicians lost the ability to play, but the broader populace has lost the discernment and ability to hear them. Passage 2 would definitely say that's an overstatement, A. The problem is not that bad. He uses the word apocalyptic very early, and the apocalypse is the end of the world. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse from the Bible is the end of everything. So something that's apocalyptic is supposed to be completely dire and horrible. And when he uses that word, that's his way of saying this is not apocalyptic. This is an overstatement. You're overreaching. You're overreacting. All right, for number 6, and that's just a basic understanding of the 2 positions. The writer of passage 2 is not suggesting that this study doesn't have merit or that it's inaccurate. He's just saying times are changing and you're overstating the problem. All right, which of the following for number 6 would the author of passage 2 likely to consider to be another apocalyptic idea? Now, you got to understand, apocalyptic is very bad. It is literally end of the world. And of all of your choices, A, B, C, and D, there's only one of them that has something really bad, and that would be driver fatalities. So if the suggestion was smartphones were going to lead to driver fatalities, if you had the study, that might be considered a little bit of an apocalyptic type study. The other 3 don't have anything in it bad enough to qualify for that. Line number 7, or question 7, lines 55 through 65. And again, that's 10 of them, and I know that some of you, when you've got 10 of them to look over, you don't want to go back. They give you the time to do it, and you should. Focus on which aspect of statistical certainty. And if you look over lines 55 through 65, you see words like many, some, limited. I think many and some show up more than once. We're talking about the range of the statistical certainty. All right, so that's the answer you need, B. For number 8, the author of passage 2 indicates that the landscape referenced in line, and I think there should have been 66 written there. That'd be a typing mistake. That would never happen on the real SAT test, but it did happen here. But you should have been able to find that. And the idea in that line is he is referencing that it is no longer defined by its traditional parameters. It is changing, but it is not distressing. That's what is said on line 66. The musical landscape is changing, but it's not distressing. And that's what you needed to look at. No longer defined by traditional parameters. So maybe at one point in American history, it was a big deal how many people could play instruments, but now not as much. And you can agree or disagree with that. These are just 2 differing opinions. One is not necessarily right. For number 9, as used in line 71, crustiest most nearly means inflexible. It is followed by its most conservative, crustiest definitions. That's something you should just be able to figure out from context. C is the only one that works. For number 10, the author of passage 1 would most likely respond to the last argument in passage 2 by asserting that. So if you look at the final argument, lines 77 through 78, he says that all that is happening is the institutions of old are trying to hold on for dear life and actually belong to the same irrelevant pile of studies on the decline of cursive or telephone conversations. Yes, cursive is in decline. Obviously, telephone conversations are in decline, but so what? That seems to be his attitude. The question is, how would the writer of passage 1 respond to that? And he would probably respond with what is his main argument. Your best answer would be A. He would come back with the argument, a survey of musical education programs has broader cultural importance. That is his point in 1. This is going to culturally impact us. And he would certainly come back to that argument in response. All right, for number 11, which best describes the tone of the first paragraph of passage 1 and the tone of the first paragraph of passage 2, respectively? Now, what that means is they're going to give you 2 words. Which one describes, the first word would describe passage 1, and the second word would describe passage 2. You have to understand that from the sentence. And once you understand that, the answer I think is pretty easy, D. The writer of passage 1 is very concerned. He thinks this is a big deal, that we're going to go through cultural changes because of this. Whereas the writer of passage 2 would be called skeptical. He doesn't necessarily think this is apocalyptic. He doesn't think this is the end of music. He thinks that the concerns are overstated. So he is skeptical of that analysis. Those would be your 2 best choices. D for 11. All right, for number 12, which best conveys the primary relationship between these 2 passages? Well, clearly passage 2 is either written in response to or in anticipation of this complaint. 3 of them eliminate themselves. Your best answer is B. A eliminates itself because 2 does not discuss some of the findings that undermine. He doesn't. For C, passage 2 adds support. No, it doesn't. And for D, passage 2 argues for revolutionary change. No, it doesn't. If you look at B, Passage 2 takes issue with some of the premises that shape the argument of Passage 1. That's exactly what it does. He states you're overstating it. There are parts of your arguments that are a little bit over the top. So B is your best answer. I think if you understood the passage, this is one of the easier tests. If you took the time. Hopefully you're getting better. Hopefully these are working for you. This is a lot of work for everybody involved. At some points in your academic career, you're either going to be glad you worked on this or you're going to wish you had worked harder, because everybody's got to take that SAT reading test, and it's a big deal. And if you score high on that, it will open doors for you. So hopefully you scored well today, and if you haven't been working hard, think about stepping it up, all right? And see you in a couple weeks when we talk about Test 8.